At this point, you should have all of the development tools necessary installed and functioning on your computer. What we're going to do now is jump in with both feet and write our first program. And we're going to write the proverbial first program for every computer science student ever called Hello World. And in that process, we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to write a program. First thing we're going to do is take a small tour of JGrasp, and you'll notice that I've got JGrasp, our integrated development environment, up on the screen. Throughout the semester we'll take a look at some other IDEs. I'll probably show you Xcode, which is Apple's development environment. Maybe we can take a look at Visual Studio, maybe look at Eclipse. So if you have any recommendations, NetBeans, which is a Java development environment that you may have seen that comes with some of the Java SDKs. So let me know if there's anything specific you'd like to look at. Right now we're going to explore what is the JGrasp integrated development environment. So the first thing you'll notice, I said before, is that we should have our Java SDK, or Software Development Kit, installed. This SDK provides the computer with the foundational kind of building blocks that it needs to know how to run and build Java applications. So really the SDK, although we utilize it as developers, it's more meant for the computer because it provides low-level code and foundations that we're going to actually utilize. To write our program, we actually need to use the integrated development environment. This is the tool that the developer uses the most. It's our gateway into writing, debugging, running Java applications, and basically having all the fun that is programming. And if you'll notice throughout the semester, I really like programming a lot, and I hope you do too. So let's take a look at what we've got here in JGrasp. Along the top, we've got a typical menu bar. We'll go through some of those components later. In this big white area in the middle, this is actually the equivalent of a text editor. We are going to be writing the source code for our programs, in other words, the human readable form of our programs, into the equivalent of what is Microsoft Notepad. It is a text editor. You can't write programs in things like Microsoft Word because they add all this formatting to your text behind the scenes, and you don't want any of that. So we only want to use a plain text editor. In this case, JGrasp has its own text editor built in. On the left-hand side, you see a typical file tree. This is like a typical Explorer. This will demonstrate or let us walk through our file hierarchy and find the files we're running, and this is typical like in any Windows application. You'll also notice a few tabs down here. This is also where we'll be getting our debugging information and a few other things in the future. At the bottom, what we have here is an input-output window and a compiler messages and any messages that the IDE wants to send to us. Basically, we are not going to write GUI applications or graphical user interface applications to the very end of class. We're mostly going to be writing applications that are meant to run on the command line. So if you're a Unix user or a Mac user who digs into the terminal, this shouldn't be new to you. If you're a Windows user who's used DOS in the past, this shouldn't be new to you. But for those of you that have mostly existed in the GUI world, well, what's nice is you don't need to worry about using the terminal or using DOS or the MS command line anymore. You just need to know that all of your input and output will occur through this kind of pseudo command line inside the integrated development environment. So that's a really nice feature as well. Alright, so let's start writing a program and talk about some of the features of actually using JGrasp. So I'm going to go up here to File. I'm going to go to New, just like I would in any program. Notice that Java is the default. I can also do a plain text file, so you can actually use JGrasp like Notepad. The other option here is Other, and you'll notice the other languages that out of the box that JGrasp can support. C and C++. I've been very interested in Objective-C lately because I've been doing a lot of iPhone development, and hopefully over the summer when I'm not building lectures for a course or I'm not focusing on helping everybody out, I'll probably be spending my time writing Objective-C apps for the iPhone, which means that oftentimes I'll look at your Java coding. Since I'm coding in multiple languages, I might make odd comments, but hopefully it doesn't happen too often. I'll try to stay with my brain totally in the Java world for you so I don't confuse anybody. Anyway, let's go to New, and we're going to create a Java file. And you'll notice that this window appears inside of this other white window. Notice it doesn't really go away. It's kind of docked in there. I'm going to expand that. One interesting thing I'll point out before I even go any further is that JGrasp itself is a Java application. So hopefully not to blow your mind, but we're actually writing Java applications using a Java application. Very cool, kind of the chicken and the egg problem right in front of us. So if you're curious what the Java graphical environment looks like, it does not look like the native Mac environment, although there are some ways in the Mac OS to fake that and make Java apps look like Mac OS apps. The other thing is on Windows that Java apps tend to have their own unique look as well. We'll talk about why that is, but I don't don't want to burden you with any extra information. But you should be already questioning this idea that, wow, I can write programs in Java on the Mac, and I can write them on Windows, and I can write them on Unix. Yeah, one of the cool things about Java is you can write one program and run it on multiple platforms. And that's an issue that we'll address throughout the semester. We're not going to take too much time right now because we're jumping in the pool. We're not taking too many chances to look at the stop and smell the roses, right? So let's jump in. All right, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on one of these toolbar buttons up here. Notice these all just appeared as we created the new Java program. First thing I'm going to do is click on this one with the numbers and toggle line numbers. This will make it a little easier during lectures so you know where I am in the program. In other words, you do not type the number 1, that is provided for you. Later on you'll be getting errors and it'll say, hey, you have an error on line 15 in your program, and it'll be a lot easier to just see where line 15 is. So I'm going to ask you to write a couple things and take my word for it. We're going to just explore the magic of writing a Java program, and kind of like, a lot of people drive a car and they're not necessarily mechanics. We're all going to write a Java program, and in the next couple weeks we'll become programmers, but today we're just going to kind of follow along, and hopefully you can get this working. So the first thing I'm going to do is type some words, and the first one's going to be public, the second one's going to be class, and I'm going to name my class Hello World. Now you'll notice that those first two words, public and class, appeared in purple. Now why is that? Well, we're working in a language, and sometimes certain words have special meanings to the language. So in Java, the word public is what's called a reserved word. You cannot use the word public unless you intend to tell Java something. It's kind of like my dog only understands a couple of words. He understands out and food. So you want to make sure that you don't use those words unless you really mean it, because he gets all excited. In this case, any word that appears in purple has a very special meaning to the Java programming language, and we only want to use it in the instances where we actually intend to use that word. Notice that the word Hello World does not turn purple, it stays black. And that's because that's a name that I've given my program. I could name it anything. Hello World. In fact, I'm going to rename it to Jason Hello World, because that will prove to you that I can name my program anything. Notice a couple things about my name of my program. I capitalize the first letter. That's a convention that all Java programmers follow, so you should get into that habit. Although I'll let you slip a few times during the first week or two of class, but later on we'll stress that more, and you should learn to follow that rule. Another thing, notice that this word has no spaces in it. Jason Hello World is one big word. So you also want to remember that when you name your Java program, it can have no spaces in it. Notice how I am highlighting the first letter of each word in the name of my program by capitalizing it. That's called camelback notation or mountaintop notation, because the capital J, then to the lower ASON, then the capital H, and it kind of looks like a mountain range if you squint and you've been working for about 200 hours in a week. So anyway, public class Jason Hello World. We're going to put that on our first line, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to set up a curly bracket. And we're going to set up another curly bracket. What do these curly brackets mean? You want to start thinking of curly brackets as containers for probably the equivalent of, say, like a paragraph. What we're going to do is think of giving instructions to the computer when we write programs. And basically between curly brackets are complete thoughts that are equivalent to an entire paragraph. Inside of those curly brackets, we're going to write the sentences that complete those paragraphs. Next thing I'm going to do is indent. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write some stuff, and I'm not going to explain it. In fact, I'm not going to explain it for a couple of weeks. You're just going to learn to type the line that I'm typing on line 3 and enjoy it. And in fact, you know what? Before I get typing too much more, I'm going to blow this up so you can't miss it. All right. Public static void main string bracket args. And then I'm also going to put a series of curly brackets after that. Why do I keep saying curly bracket? Well, you hold down the shift key. They're the two keys next to the letter P on my keyboard. They should be in the same spot on your keyboard. Notice that this statement on lines 3, 4, and 5 is actually in between the curly brackets, sorry for moving the mouse, on lines 1 through 7. Well, what does that mean? Well, think of it like this. These curly brackets on line 1 through 7 are kind of a grouping for, say, a section in the document. Inside of that, we have another paragraph. Basically, what we say is this main method is nested within the outer class. Okay, that's the official way of saying the lines of code on 3, 4, and 5 are inside of the lines of code on 1 through 7. And you just need to have it formatted this way. And again, we'll talk more about this, but we're just trying to get a program written. So what do we want our program to do? All we want to do is print out Hello World. So let's go for it. I'm going to type an instruction that Java understands called system.out.println. Inside of the system.out.println statement, I'm also going to type the word hello world. And I'll put some extra spaces in here so it's a little bit easier to see. This line ends with a semicolon. And what that means is that's the equivalent of a sentence. So what we've got here is a set of curly brackets that indicate a paragraph and a line that indicates a sentence in that paragraph. It's a simple statement. It's one instruction given to the computer to execute. And really, without even knowing too much about it, you know that this indicates system.out.println. Well, you can read that says println, and maybe you could infer that that means print line. And what's it going to print? Well, the stuff that turned green between these double quotes. And notice there's a semicolon at the line. Almost every simple statement in Java we end with a semicolon. It's like the period to the sentence. So really what this does is it writes the string hello world to standard system output. And standard system output on a computer is actually the monitor most of the times. I mean, system output can be redirected to a file, to a printer, across a network. But the reality is system.out will almost always be the monitor in our cases. And so now what we've got is a complete program. So let's zoom out a little bit and take a look at some of the other features in JGrasp. And what I'm going to do is actually zoom all the way out. And we need to take this program and we need to run it. Now, a couple things need to happen here. What did we not do? We didn't save our program. So the first thing I'm going to do is come up here and click Save. Notice that JGrasp went ahead and named my file the same name that I had written up here. So notice this says JSON Hello World, capital J, capital H, capital W, and my file name says JSON Hello World, capital J, capital H, capital W. Okay, this is really important. The name of your file must always exactly match the name of the program after the word class. They have to be the same. The only difference is the file extension. So if your file's name is JSON Hello World with a capital JHW, after the word class, then the actual file name saved to disk must be JSON-hello-world.java with a capital J, capital H, capital W. Okay, make sure that the file name that appears here is exactly the same as the name you put after your class statement here. JGrasp will always, 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 always do that for you as long as you have the syntax of your program correct. All right, this I'm going to save. And I'm just randomly saving this to my hard drive. You should not do that. You should save it to a very specific place. Now, I'm also going to shrink this window because I would like this whole program to fit into the area of the screen that I'm recording. So now the next thing I am going to do is we need to take this program, which is actually written, notice, in human language. This is very readable. Even if you aren't a programmer, you could look at this and kind of get an idea of what's happening here. And the problem is the machine, the computer, doesn't speak natural language. I mean, if it did, we could just be like, hey, computer, make me dinner. But the problem here is we can't do that. We need to give the computer a very specific set of instructions. And when I think of a computer, maybe you think of the fact that computers speak in binary, their native language is zeros and ones, something that we'll talk about in detail next week. But if you don't want to think about it, computers talk in a weird language like beep, boop, boop, beep, boop, boop, boop. And we need to take what's written in human language and we need to convert it into that equivalent of beeps and boops, right? So to do that, we're going to take the program written in human language. We're going to come up here, and you see this plus sign. It says compile file. It means when you compile a program to convert the program from the human readable source code form over to the machine understandable bits of beeps and boops, or zeros and ones. All right? In Java, there's actually an intermediary step, and I'm oversimplifying. But essentially, compiling takes the human readable form and converts it to a machine readable form. So I'm going to click compile. Notice down here at the bottom of my JGrasp window, I got a little message. It says operation complete and nothing blew up. What do I mean by blew up? Well, what if I forgot to put a period in my statement? If I forget that semicolon that indicates the end of a simple statement? Well, think of times when you've taken English class and you've forgotten a comma or a period in a paper. You lose points. You might get yelled at by the teacher. In this case, I'm going to click compile again. And now notice what I get down here. I get an error. It says, hey, I was expecting you to put a semicolon at the end of that line, and you didn't. This is an example of a syntax error, a very specific type of error that says, hey, you didn't follow the rules of the language. And we'll talk a lot about those over the semester. Usually at the beginning of writing a program in this class, of writing your first programs, syntax errors occur because you forget a semicolon, you forget some double quotes, you forget a opening or curly bracket. So one of the things you need to start paying attention to when you're reading through the book and reading through my sample code is to go ahead and try to pay attention to how it's formed and what's there and why it absolutely needs to be there. But notice the world didn't end. I just go back. I have my semicolon. Now I'm going to go back up. I'm going to click compile, and my program has now been converted from a human readable form to a machine readable form. And you're saying, Jason, I don't believe you. Well, remember I said that your file has the file extension .java? Well, after I click the compile button, take notice, all right, that now there's a file named jasonhelloworld.java, and above it there's a file called jasonhelloworld.class. Any file with a .class extension is going to be a file that is in the appropriate format to be understood and executed by the machine. If you don't obey the syntax rules of the language, notice before when I forgot the semicolon, it will refuse to create a .class file. So .java files are source code, human readable programming code. .class files are machine readable, although I've met many people who can actually read .class files, but they're more friendly to be read by a machine, and .java files are more friendly to be read by humans. So cool, we've got this program. It compiled correctly. It's in a format that the machine can understand. It'll be very happy. Now how do we run it? Guess what? We click on the little running person. And as long as we got no errors when we compiled, when we click run, we get our output. And congratulations, you just got Hello World. Okay? Woo, we can clap. I'll clap for you. If you had any problems, you should look exactly through this lecture again and try and figure out what the problems were. Type things exactly as they are. If you're not sure why we're doing certain things or things seem a little bit confusing, don't stress. Like I said, this is the first week. We're diving straight in. I wanted you to write a program and feel the success, kind of get an idea of what programming looks like and what it is. We will be backtracking next week and for the rest of the semester and going over all of these things in detail and slowing down. But now that you've got these tools installed, you can verify that they work. If you have any problems with getting this to execute, please make comments on the discussion board for the course. Any other questions, you can email me at the email address that comes at the end of this lecture. Thank you.